So Dawao, come closer. Closer to one another, closer to stories, and closer to imagining knowledge past the ways that we've been instructed to. I want you to think about a time that someone shared something with you that really resonated. Maybe it helped you navigate a difficult moment. Maybe it changed the way that you navigate through the world, or maybe it stayed with you through difficult circumstances. For me, those words came from my mother. She would rarely teach through direct motivation. Instead, she would share stories. Sometimes the stories were from her own experiences. Sometimes the stories were from her grandparents and my grandparents. And sometimes they were from mahmayas, proverbs, passed down through generations. What these stories taught me was that lessons weren't generally just reflected in the ways that we envision normal frameworks to envision foresight. Sometimes they were taught through the quiet moments of making something together. When I started my research, I thought I had to have structure, interviews. But when I sat down with my mother, she taught me that we can approach this differently. Instead, we began weaving together. In this moment, storytelling became another form of sheko, and sheko became a form of storytelling. What she taught me was that storytelling doesn't necessarily come through one direction. It happens through creating things with one another. Growing up, there were sayings my mother repeated to me whenever life got difficult. Dahdahira, tie your waist, brace yourself. Or she would say, Nag nolis kadig, make yourself alive. It was meant to prepare you, meant to make you think ahead. But I didn't necessarily see these frameworks shown in media. Often, Somali people and the Somali diaspora were confined to narratives around struggle and crisis. So it was hard for me to connect to them. In this exploration, I decided to take a look at why was I so far away from the foresight knowledge that was being shared with me. To explore that, I returned to Somalia, not only to support my own research, but to better understand my way of thinking, to understand my community and where my knowledge came from. Ultimately, while here, I decided to take a look at the knowledge and the frameworks that helped shape and build my understanding and Somali foresight. What I understood is that rarely did people look at the future alone. Again and again, participants returned to one another, to community, to building futures alongside one another. One participant shared, "Hal far folmad wat dakhto." One finger alone cannot wash a face. In this sense, or this proverb, it really reflects the way that foresight is envisioned within the Somali community. It's not something that's done individually, but rather collectively. But something else was being passed across generations: resilience. Through these conversations, I understood that not just community was being passed on, but a lot of people spoke about the fact that they inherited the ways of thinking from their parents. A lot of the times, participants would speak about their shared experiences growing up, facing displacement, rebuilding, and learning from their parents' experiences. Many of the proverbs shared with them was intended to help them navigate through life, but in another form, it also shaped the limitations in which they were able to imagine. Sometimes they would be stuck within resilience, so that meant that they're not allowed to envision past just surviving. And that made it difficult when you're trying to connect to an imaginable or greater future. But in having these discussions, I recognized that imagination, community, and resilience were all connecting to something. They were connecting to belonging. I noticed that the futures people imagined depended on whether or not they believed they belonged inside them. When participants spoke about the future, they spoke about futures individually and weren't able to imagine fully what's possible. But yet, when we shifted to imagining collective futures, the room got more expansive. They were suddenly able to think about more ideas and more ways that they had different or diverse futures. What that shared with me is that we're all combined into thinking, but it can only be expanded once we are able to connect foresight, frameworks, and other forms of knowledge, not just what we've been taught to put trust into. When I think about the future now, I think about my mom. I think about the wisdom she shared with me, about the knowledge that was passed down through generations, about the ways that she taught me to move through life. So I challenge you to think about past your expectations, past the frameworks that you've been taught to trust, and what could happen if you simply come closer. And so, wow.